Hi. This is Moonlit Inc. BL. Before we start, the story you are about to hear deals with the deeply personal and often invisible weight of psychological trauma and its long-lasting effects on the mind and body. While Brent's journey is one of healing and hope, we know that for many, the attic feels very real every day. If you or someone you know is struggling with the shadows of the past, please remember that you do not have to carry that burden alone. Reaching out is not a sign of weakness, it is the first step toward reclaiming your horizon. We encourage you to seek support from qualified mental health professionals, counselors, or local support networks. There are people ready to listen, and there is a world waiting for you beyond the door. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve to be heard. And with that, let's begin. Chapter 1: The Quiet Roommate. The air in dorm room 502 was always exactly the same, still, sterile, and smelling faintly of unscented detergent. Brent Lauren liked it that way. For Brent, the world was a sensory minefield. The university was a cacophony of scraping chairs, the metallic tang of industrial kitchens, and the suffocating heat of crowded hallways. But here, behind a heavy oak door that he locked precisely 3 times every time he entered, he could breathe. He sat at his desk, his posture rigid, staring at a stack of business textbooks. He was a third-year student, yet he moved through the campus like a ghost through a machine. He didn't use the elevators. The thought of being trapped in a moving metal box with strangers made his throat constrict, so he took the stairs to the 5th floor every day. His lungs usually burned by the time he reached the top, but the physical pain was preferable to the psychological claustrophobia. A sharp, rhythmic knocking startled him. Brent's shoulders hiked toward his ears, his heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't move. He waited. The door opened. It was move-in day for the new semester. Brent had spent the last 2 years cycled through a rotating door of roommates. Most stayed a week. Some stayed a month. All of them eventually fled to the housing office with the same complaint. It's like living with a mannequin. He doesn't talk, he doesn't eat, and he watches me like he's waiting for me to kill him. In walked a guy who didn't look like he belonged in a quiet room. He was tall, with broad shoulders, clad in a simple charcoal hoodie, carrying a heavy duffel bag with ease. He had a calm, grounded energy that seemed to settle the air rather than stir it up. "Hey," the guy said, his voice a low, steady hum. "I'm William Asher. Psych major. I think I'm your new permanent shadow." Brent didn't look him in the eye. He looked at William's shoes, clean, dark sneakers. "Brent," he whispered, his voice raspy from disuse. William didn't push for more. He didn't blast music or start a frantic conversation to fill the silence. Instead, he began unpacking with a deliberate, quiet efficiency. Brent watched him from the corner of his eye, his body coiled like a spring. He was waiting for the inevitable, the loud phone calls, the smell of greasy takeout, the intrusion of a stranger's life into his fragile sanctuary. But William was different. When he reached for a lamp, he did it without clattering. When he closed his wardrobe, he caught the door so it wouldn't slam. As the sun began to set, casting long, amber shadows across the linoleum, Brent reached into his drawer. He pulled out a single, factory-sealed protein bar and a bottle of water. He stared at the bar, his stomach cramping with hunger, yet his mind screamed warnings. Who touched the wrapper? Was the seal truly intact? He felt a gaze on him. He looked up, his knuckles white as he gripped the plastic packaging. William was sitting on the edge of his own bed, watching Brent, not with judgment, but with a strange, clinical curiosity that felt unexpectedly soft. "The stairs are a hell of a climb, aren't they?" William asked casually. "I saw you coming up earlier. 5 floors is a workout." Brent flinched, surprised that someone had noticed him in the stairwell. I prefer the air there," he lied, his voice barely audible. William nodded slowly, as if that answer made perfect sense. "Fair enough. Elevators always smell like wet umbrellas anyway." William stood up, stretched, and headed toward the door. He didn't lock it behind him. He left it a few inches ajar, allowing a sliver of the hallway light to spill into the room. "I'm heading out to grab some coffee." Do you need anything? Sealed? Bottled? Brent blinked. No one had ever asked him that. No one had ever prioritized the state of the food over the food itself. No, Brent managed to say. I'm full. William looked at the unopened protein bar in Brent's shaking hand, then back at Brent's pale, hollow face. He didn't argue. He didn't point out the lie. Okay, William said softly. I'll be back in an hour. I'll keep the noise down when I come in. When the door clicked shut, gently, without a jar, Brent finally let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for years. He looked at the sliver of light William had left for him. For the first time in a long time, the silence in the room didn't feel like a grave. It felt like a beginning. Chapter 2: Observation and Small Bites. The second week of the semester arrived with a persistent, gray drizzle that made the dorm feel even more like a bunker. For Brent, the change in weather was a threat. Rain meant dampness, and dampness meant the smell of the attic. He sat in the communal dining hall, tucked into the furthest corner possible. He had a tray in front of him, a bowl of plain white rice and a sealed carton of apple juice. It was the safest thing the cafeteria offered, but even then, his stomach was a knot of barbed wire. He stared at the rice, searching for a stray hair, a discolored grain, anything that signaled a breach of safety. Across the loud, clattering hall, he felt a familiar presence. William wasn't sitting with the other psychology majors who were boisterously debating about theories. He was sitting 2 tables away, positioned so he wasn't staring directly at Brent, but close enough to act as a buffer against the crowd. Brent took a bite. Then another. By the third, his throat closed up. The texture felt wrong, too soft, too much like the mush his nanny used to force-feed him while whispering that his parents were never coming back. He pushed the tray away, his face paling. Full already? William's voice was like a low-frequency radio wave, cutting through the screeching of chairs. He had moved over, sliding into the seat opposite Brent, but he left a generous 2 feet of table space between them. I'm not very hungry today, Brent whispered, pulling his sleeves over his palms. William didn't look at the tray. He looked at Brent's eyes, which were darting toward the exit. The noise in here is pretty brutal today. Sounds like a construction site. I'm thinking of heading back to the room. You coming? It was an out. A lifeline. Brent nodded quickly, grateful beyond words. Back in room 502, the silence was a physical relief. Brent retreated to his bed, curling his legs up to his chest. He expected William to go back to his textbooks, but instead, William reached into a grocery bag he'd brought in earlier. I stopped by the convenience store, William said, his tone conversational. He pulled out 2 identical, plastic-wrapped packages of crackers and a jar of peanut butter that still had the plastic safety seal intact. William sat at his own desk and made a show of inspecting the seal. He held it up so Brent could see it. I hate it when these things are tampered with. Look, the plastic is still tight. No air bubbles. Brent watched, mesmerized. William wasn't just talking, he was performing a ritual of safety. William snapped the seal loudly. Pop. He took a cracker, dipped it in, and ate it. He chewed, swallowed, and waited a beat. Actually pretty good. Not too salty. He then slid the second, unopened package of crackers across the floor toward Brent's bed. He didn't hand it to him. He didn't want to invade Brent's personal space. I bought too many. William lied easily. Help me out. Brent looked at the package. It was identical to the one William was currently eating. He saw the way William's throat moved when he swallowed, a subconscious proof that the food was untainted. With trembling fingers, Brent reached down and picked up the crackers. He didn't eat them immediately. He spent 5 minutes inspecting every millimeter of the plastic. William just kept reading his psychology textbook, humming softly to himself, acting as if he wasn't paying attention at all. Finally, Brent tore the plastic. The sound was loud in the quiet room. He took a small bite. It was dry, bland, and perfectly safe. Thank you, Brent said, so softly it was almost a breath. William didn't look up from his book, but a small, satisfied smile played at the corner of his mouth. Don't mention it. I hate eating alone anyway. Makes me feel like a loser. Brent looked at the tall, handsome, and clearly popular fourth-year student across from him. William Asher was many things, but a loser wasn't one of them. For the first time, Brent wondered why someone like William was being so patient with someone who felt like a ghost. Later that night, as the lights went out, William didn't click his bedside lamp off entirely. He dimmed it to a soft, warm glow. Is the light okay? William asked into the dark. Yes, Brent replied, staring at the ceiling. The dark, it's too heavy. I get it, William said. The light stays on then. Good night, Brent. For the first time in years, Brent didn't dream of the attic. He dreamed of the sound of a plastic seal popping open, the sound of someone proving the world wasn't trying to kill him. Chapter 3: The Kitchenette Incident. The smell hit Brent before he even fully opened the door to room 502. It was the scent of browning butter and garlic, warm, savory, and deep. To any other college student, it would have been a heavenly upgrade from the scent of stale laundry and old textbooks. To Brent, it was a physical blow to the chest. His hand froze on the doorknob. His vision blurred, the hallway behind him seemingly stretching into an infinite, dark tunnel. Suddenly, he wasn't 21 years old in a university dorm. He was 8, sitting at a heavy wooden table in a silent house, watching a woman with a fixed, glassy smile push a plate of special stew toward him. Eat up, Brenty, her voice echoed in his mind. Your mommy isn't here to feed you. Only I care about you. If you don't eat this, you'll never grow up to see them again. Brent's breath hitched, coming in shallow, jagged bursts. He forced his legs to move, stumbling into the room. William was standing by the small induction burner in their kitchenette, a wooden spoon in hand. He looked domestic, relaxed, his sleeves pushed up to his elbows. He looked up, a bright greeting on his lips, but it died the second he saw Brent's face. Brent was trembling violently, his back pressed against the door he had just shut. His eyes were wide, blown out with terror, tracking the steam rising from the pan as if it were a poisonous gas. Brent? William dropped the spoon onto a rest. He didn't approach, he stayed behind the counter, keeping the barrier between them. Hey, talk to me. What's wrong? Turn it off, Brent choked out, his hands clawing at his own sweater. Please. Turn it off. It's in there. You don't know. You didn't see her put it in. William's expression shifted from confusion to a sharp, focused clarity. His psych lessons kicked in, but it was tempered by a raw, personal concern he hadn't expected to feel. He immediately reached down and clicked the burner off. The sizzling died instantly. It's off, Brent. Look at my hands. William held them up, palms open. Nothing is happening. The heat is gone. Brent sank to the floor, his knees giving out. He tucked his head between his legs, trying to block out the aroma that felt like a trap. William moved then, not toward Brent, but toward the window. He cracked it open, letting the crisp, chilly evening air sweep in to clear the scent. Then, he grabbed a stool and sat down several feet away from the crumpled boy on the floor. I was making pasta, William said, his voice dropping to that low, grounding frequency Brent had come to rely on. Just noodles, butter, and a little garlic. Everything came from a sealed box. I opened the butter myself. Brent's sobbing was quiet, a desperate, hitching sound. She used to put things in the food. Bitter things. Things that made my stomach burn for days. She said it was medicine to make me love her. William felt a cold flash of anger toward a woman he had never met, but he kept his voice steady. I'm not her, Brent. And I would never, ever let anything hurt you in this room. This is our space. It's safe. After a long silence, Brent looked up. His face was blotchy, his eyes red-rimmed. How do you know? How can you be sure? William stood up slowly. He walked to the counter and plated a small portion of the pasta. He walked back and placed the plate on the floor between them. Then, he took a fork and began to eat. He took a large bite, then another, then a third. I'm eating it, Brent. See? William talked while he chewed, trying to normalize the moment. I'm okay. It's just food. It's just fuel. He held the fork out, handle first, toward Brent. Just one noodle. For me? To show your brain that the past isn't happening right now. Brent stared at the plate. He looked at William's calm, patient eyes. The paranoia was screaming, but a smaller, newer voice, a voice that sounded like William, whispered that it was okay to try. Slowly, Brent reached out. His fingers brushed William's as he took the fork, and the small spark of human contact seemed to ground him. He took a single noodle. He chewed it slowly, his heart hammering. It tasted like butter. It tasted like garlic. It didn't taste like bitterness or betrayal. Brent swallowed. He didn't die. The room didn't go dark. Good? William asked softly. Brent nodded, a single tear rolling down his cheek. It's okay. Yeah. William smiled, a genuine, warm expression that reached his eyes. It's okay. We've got this. Chapter 4: Unlocking the Attic. The rain from the previous day had settled into a thick, clinging fog that pressed against the dorm windows, turning the world outside into a gray void. Inside room 502, the only light came from the soft glow of William's desk lamp and the blue tint of his laptop screen. Brent was sitting on his bed, his back against the wall, watching the fog. The successful pasta incident from the day before had left him exhausted, as if his body were crashing from a decade-long adrenaline spike. You're staring at the window like you expect something to climb in, William said softly, breaking the silence. He closed his laptop and turned his chair to face Brent. He didn't move closer. He respected that invisible bubble that Brent required to feel in control. Brent pulled his knees tighter to his chest. In the attic, the windows were painted shut. I used to stare at the cracks in the wood, trying to see if the sun was out. If the sun was out, I knew my parents might be home soon. But if it was gray like this... He swallowed hard. It meant I was still invisible. William leaned back, his expression grave but patient. The attic. That's where she kept you. Brent nodded. The words started to spill out, thin and fragile at first, then gaining momentum like a breaking dam. My parents, they traveled for business. Days at a time. They thought she was a godsend. She was quiet, efficient, and she loved me. That's what they told themselves. He let out a jagged breath. She didn't love me. She loved my father. She had this delusion that if my mother was gone, and if I was disciplined enough to be silent, she could step into our lives. She saw me as a rival for his attention. An 8-year-old rival. William's jaw tightened. As a psychology student, he'd read about these cases. Munchausen by proxy, delusional attachment, child endangerment, but hearing it from the boy across from him made the textbook definitions feel hollow and cold. She would lock me up there when they were gone. Brent continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. It was damp. It smelled like old insulation and dust. She'd bring me food that tasted like chemicals, cleaning fluid, sometimes worse, and tell me that if I didn't eat it, it proved I didn't love my family. That I was the reason they stayed away so long. Brent, William interrupted gently. You know none of that was true, right? You were a child. You were a victim of a very sick woman's fantasy. I know it here, Brent said, tapping his temple. But my stomach doesn't know. My skin doesn't know. When the door locks, or when I smell something cooking, my body thinks I'm 8 years old again, waiting for the poison. He looked at William, his eyes shimmering with a sudden, raw vulnerability. Do you think I'm crazy, Will? Everyone else did. They just thought I was a freak who didn't talk. William stood up slowly, testing the air. When Brent didn't flinch, he took a few steps closer and sat on the edge of his own bed, mere feet away. I think you're incredibly brave, William said firmly. Most people would have folded completely. But you're here. You're passing business classes while carrying a literal house of horrors on your back. William reached into his bag and pulled out a small, professional business card. He leaned forward and placed it on the nightstand between them. I'm a student, Brent. I can listen, and I can taste test your food, and I can keep the lights on. But you deserve to put that backpack down. He pointed to the card. Dr. Emil Cole. He's a specialist in childhood trauma. He's a good man. He helped me once, after my own family stuff. Brent looked at the card. Dr. Emil Cole, psychologist. The white paper looked stark against the dark wood of the nightstand. I'm scared, Brent admitted, his voice breaking. If I talk about it more, if I really open that door, I don't know if I can close it again. I'm scared I'll get stuck in that attic forever. William reached out, his hand hovering in the air for a second before he gently rested it on Brent's foot, which was covered by a thick wool sock. It was a small, grounding weight. You won't get stuck, William promised. Because this time, you aren't in there alone. I'll be sitting right in the waiting room. And when you come out, we're coming back here. To our room. Where the windows open and the food is safe. Brent looked from the card to William's hand, then up to his face. For the first time, the deathly quiet roommate didn't look dead. He looked like someone who was finally starting to wonder what it felt like to be alive. Okay, Brent whispered. Maybe I'll try. Chapter 5, Shadows of the Past. For a few days, the air in room 502 felt lighter. Brent had tucked Dr. Cole's card into his wallet, a small, paper talisman against the darkness. He had even managed to eat half a sandwich from the deli, a feat that had earned him a proud, lopsided grin from William. But the world outside didn't care about progress. It arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. William was at the library, and Brent had returned early from a lecture on macroeconomics. He found the envelopes slid under their door. It was an old-fashioned, off-white envelope, the kind used for formal invitations, but it was stained. A dark, rusty smear ran across the corner, looking like dried mud, though the metallic scent clinging to the paper suggested something far more visceral. Brent picked it up, his heart beginning a slow, heavy thud against his ribs. There was no return address. Just his name, written in a shaky, sprawling script that he recognized with a jolt of pure, icy adrenaline. Brenty. His fingers shook so violently he nearly tore the paper as he forced it open. Inside was a single sheet of notebook paper. The writing wasn't in ink. It was a dark, brownish red, thick in some places, translucent in others. I'm out, Brenty. They couldn't keep me. The attic is lonely without you. I'm coming to finish your dinner. The room began to spin. The walls of the dorm seemed to shrink, the ceiling lowering until it pressed against the top of his head. The smell of the paper, iron and rot, filled his nostrils, replacing the scent of William's laundry detergent. He wasn't in the university anymore. He was back in the dark, the damp wood pressing against his spine, the sound of a key turning in a lock that only opened for a monster. Brent's lungs refused to expand. He dropped the letter as if it were a burning coal and slumped against the wall, his hands clawing at his throat. Heh heh. The sound of his own hyperventilation was loud and jarring in the quiet room. His vision tunneled until all he could see was the rusty smear on the floor. The door swung open. Brent? I forgot my. William stopped mid-sentence. He didn't need a psychology degree to recognize a total system collapse. William was across the room in 2 strides. He saw the letter on the floor, the dark stains, and the chilling words. His blood ran cold, but he shoved his own fear into a dark corner of his mind. Brent was turning a terrifying shade of gray, his eyes rolling back. Brent! Look at me! Brent, eyes on me! William dropped to his knees, grabbing Brent's hands. They were ice cold. Breathe with me. In and out. Come on, Brent. You're in 502. You're with me. But Brent was too far gone. The shock, combined with the weeks of barely eating and the sudden spike in cortisol, was too much for his fragile system. His grip on William's hoodie slackened, and his head lolled forward. Brent? Brent! William caught him before his head hit the floor. Brent was dead weight, his skin clammy and burning with a sudden, stress-induced fever. William didn't hesitate. He lifted Brent onto the bed, stripping off the boy's shoes and tucking a heavy duvet around him. He grabbed a washcloth, soaking it in cool water to press against Brent's forehead. Throughout the night, Brent drifted in and out of a delirious sleep. He whimpered, crying out about the bitter taste and the locked door. Each time, William was there. He held Brent's hand, anchoring him to the present, whispering reassurances until his own voice grew hoarse. As the sun began to peek through the blinds, the fever finally started to break. Brent's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and red-rimmed. He saw William sitting on a stool by the bed, looking exhausted, a bowl of soup steaming on the nightstand. "Will?" Brent's voice was a ghost of a sound. "I'm here," William said, his voice thick with relief. He reached out, gently brushing a damp lock of hair from Brent's forehead. "I'm right here. You're safe. I called the campus security about the letter, and I called Dr. Cole. Nobody is getting near this room, Brent. I promise you." Brent looked at the soup, then at William. For the first time, he didn't check for a seal. He didn't ask for a taste test. He simply reached out a trembling hand, and William guided the spoon to his lips. "Thank you," Brent whispered between sips. You didn't have to do all this." William paused, the spoon hovering in the air. He looked at Brent, really looked at him, at the fragility and the flickering strength underneath. "I did," William said, his voice dropping to a raw, honest level. "Because I like you, Brent. Not just as a roommate. I like you. And seeing you like this, it breaks my heart into 1,000 pieces." Brent froze. The soup, the letter, the fever, everything seemed to stand still. He looked at William, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and a sudden, terrifying warmth. "Will, you don't have to say anything," William said quickly, though his hand shook slightly as he set the bowl down. "You just get better. That's the only thing that matters right now." Chapter 6: The Unspoken and the Absence. The silence that followed William's confession wasn't like the peaceful quiet they had cultivated over the last few weeks. This silence was heavy, charged with a static electricity that made the fine hairs on Brent's arms stand up. Brent lay back against the pillows, his heart performing a strange, fluttering dance that had nothing to do with his fever. "I like you?" The words looped in his brain. People didn't like Brent Lauren. They tolerated him, they pitied him, or, in the case of the woman who haunted his nightmares, they tried to possess him. But William's felt different. It felt like a warm hearth in the middle of a blizzard. "Will?" Brent started, his voice cracking. He looked at William's face, seeing the vulnerability there, the way his strong shoulders were tensed as if bracing for a blow. I don't know how to. Everything is so loud right now. The letter, the nanny, and now this. I can't think straight." William gave a small, pained nod. He reached out, squeezing Brent's hand one last time before pulling away. "I know. I shouldn't have said it now. You're recovering, and you're scared, and the last thing you need is me adding more pressure." "It's not that I don't," Brent began, but the words caught in his throat. He was terrified. If he said he liked William back, would that give William power over him? Would the safety of their friendship turn into something he couldn't control? "Wait," Brent finally whispered, closing his eyes. "Please. Just give me a little time to breathe." William stood up, his expression unreadable. "Of course. I'll give you all the time you need, Brent." He stayed just long enough to make sure Brent's fever hadn't returned, then he packed a small bag. "I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a bit. It's close to campus. You have my number, and I've alerted the dormitory to keep an extra eye on the hall. Dr. Cole's office knows to expect a call. You have space, Brent. Use it." When the door clicked shut, Brent felt a sudden, sharp pang of regret. He wanted to call him back, but his vocal cords felt paralyzed. "It's for the best," he told himself. Space is good. But space, for someone with Brent's history, was a dangerous thing. The first day was manageable. He used the time to scrub the floor where the letter had fallen, using so much bleach his eyes watered. He told himself he was reclaiming his territory. By the second day, the silence of the room began to sour. Without William's humming, without the soft sound psychology lessons and podcasts playing on a laptop, the room felt less like a sanctuary and more like a waiting room. Every creak in the hallway was the nanny's footsteps. Every shadow on the wall was a hand reaching for a lock. By the third day, Brent stopped eating. The protein bars stayed in the drawer. The thought of opening them without William there to verify the world felt impossible. His paranoia, which had been neatly tucked away by William's presence, roared back to life. He left because you're a burden, the voice in his head hissed. He confessed just to see if you were broken enough to fall for it, and then he realized you weren't worth the trouble. On the fourth day, Brent didn't get out of bed. He lay in the dark, the blinds shut tight, his phone dead on the nightstand because he couldn't find the energy to reach for the charger. He felt like he was back in the attic, damp, cold, and utterly forgotten. He wasn't sure if he was waiting for William or waiting for the end. He didn't hear the key in the lock. He didn't hear the door open. The first thing he felt was a burst of cool air and the smell of the outdoors, rain, asphalt, and that familiar, grounding scent of charcoal and cedar. "Brent? Why is it so dark in here?" William's voice was sharp with a sudden, jagged edge of panic. He dropped his bag and lunged for the light switch. The overhead fluorescent flickered to life, illuminating the room. Brent was curled on the floor by the foot of his bed, his face pale and sunken, his eyes wide and vacant. He looked like a ghost that had forgotten how to haunt. "Oh God, Brent!" William breathed, dropping to his knees. He didn't hesitate this time. He gathered Brent's limp, shivering body into his arms, pulling him onto his lap. "What happened?" I thought I was helping. I thought I was giving you the space you asked for." Brent's fingers curled into William's hoodie, clutching the fabric with a desperate, white-knuckled grip. A broken, jagged sob tore from his chest. "You went away," Brent wailed, the sound raw and childlike. "I thought you were gone for good. I thought I was back in the attic." William held him tighter, rocking him slightly, his own eyes stinging. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm an idiot, Brent. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. I've got you." Chapter 7: The Return and the Reconciliation. The warmth of William's body was an anchor in a sea of gray. Brent clung to him, his face buried in the crook of William's neck, his tears soaking into the heavy fabric of the charcoal hoodie. He was shaking so hard his teeth rattled, a physical release of 4 days of stored-up terror. "I'm here, Brent. I'm right here," William whispered, his voice thick with a mixture of relief and self-loathing. He shifted, pulling Brent closer until Brent was practically in his lap, shielding him from the oppressive shadows of the room. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I stayed, I'd be forcing you to give me an answer before you were ready. I'm so sorry." Brent shook his head against William's shoulder, his voice muffled and shaky. "I thought I wanted space. But the space it filled up with everything else. The letter. Her. I couldn't eat. I couldn't move. I realized that without you, the room isn't safe anymore. I'm not safe." William pulled back just enough to look Brent in the eyes. He was horrified by what he saw, the dark circles under Brent's eyes, the way his skin seemed almost translucent. "When was the last time you ate? Or slept?" Brent looked away, ashamed. "I don't know. 2 days ago? Or 3? William swore under his breath, but his touch remained incredibly gentle. He helped Brent up from the floor and onto the bed, propping him up against the pillows. He moved with a sense of urgency, his psych lessons and practicum knowledge warring with his personal desperation. "Stay. Don't move," William commanded softly. He went to the small fridge and pulled out a bottle of electrolyte water, cracking the seal in front of Brent so the sound echoed. "Sip this." Slowly. As Brent drank, the color began to return to his cheeks, bit by bit. William sat on the edge of the bed, his hands resting on his knees, his expression pained. We need to talk, William said. Really talk. No more guessing what the other person needs. Brent set the bottle down, his hands finally steadying. I was scared, Will. When you said you liked me, all I could think about was the nanny. She said she loved me, but her love was a cage. It was poison. I didn't know how to separate what you feel from what she said. William reached out, pausing midair to wait for Brent's silent permission. When Brent leaned toward him, William cupped his cheek, his thumb brushing over a stray tear. Love shouldn't be a cage, Brent. And it definitely shouldn't be poison. Love is supposed to be the door that stays unlocked so you can leave whenever you want, but you stay because you want to. I don't want to fix you, and I don't want to own you. I just want to be the person who checks the locks so you can sleep. Brent let out a long, shuddering breath. The logic of it, the sheer simplicity of William's definition, began to dismantle the jagged walls in his mind. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to leave, Brent whispered. I don't think I'm ready for everything yet. I'm still scared of the dark, and I still can't go near a cafeteria. But I don't want you to stay at your brother's. I want you here. In our room. I'm staying, William promised, his voice firm. From now on, we talk. If you need space, you tell me, and I'll go to the library for an hour. But I'm always coming back. They sat in silence for a long time after that, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of the last 4 days. It was the sound of a foundation being poured. Eventually, William stood up and started opening the blinds, letting the moonlight filter in. He picked up the discarded letter from the desk, the one written in blood, and put it in a drawer out of sight. Tomorrow, William said, turning back to Brent, we call Dr. Cole. Together. No more running from the attic, Brent. We're going to tear that house down. Brent looked at the drawer where the letter was hidden, then back at William. For the first time, the monster didn't feel quite so tall. Okay, Brent said, a small, fragile smile touching his lips. Together. Chapter 8, Steps Toward the Light. The transition didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, grueling process of unlearning 2 decades of survival instincts. But for the first time, Brent wasn't doing it in the dark. The first few sessions with Dr. Emile Cole were spent mostly in silence. William sat in the waiting room every single time, a silent promise in a plastic chair. Gradually, Brent began to speak. He spoke about the attic, the smell of the dust, and the crushing weight of being the replacement for a mother who didn't know he was missing. Dr. Cole was patient, never pushing, merely helping Brent realize that the nanny's delusions were a storm he had survived, not a shadow he was forced to become. By the second month, Brent was doing the unthinkable. He was leaving the room. It started with short trips to the campus library. Then, a quiet corner of a local cafe. William was always there, usually 3 feet away, reading a textbook but keeping a metaphorical hand on Brent's shoulder. Brent started making small talk with the barista, just a thank you, or keep the change, but each word felt like a victory over the silence that had once defined him. You're doing it, you know, William said one afternoon as they sat in a sun-drenched park near the edge of campus. Brent was actually eating a muffin, not just tasting it, but finishing it. Brent looked down at the crumbs on his napkin. I didn't think I'd ever be able to sit in a place this open without looking for the exits. You haven't looked at the gate once in 20 minutes, William noted with a grin. I think I'm ready, Brent said suddenly. To see my parents. I want them to see me, like this. The meeting took place at a quiet, upscale bistro. Brent's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lauren, arrived looking older, their faces etched with the lingering guilt of the years they had spent away on business. When they saw Brent standing at the table, his posture relaxed and a genuine, albeit small, smile on his face, Mrs. Lauren burst into tears. The dinner was a revelation. Brent didn't flinch when the waiter brought the plates. He didn't wait for a taste test. He talked about his classes, his therapy, and the way the world looked now that the fog had cleared. We owe you so much, William, his father said, reaching across the table to shake William's hand. We didn't know how to reach him. We felt like we were mourning a son who was still standing right in front of us. William didn't just reach me, Brent said, his voice steady. He reached under the table, finding William's hand and lacing their fingers together. He stayed until I could reach back. Brent took a deep breath, looking at his parents. The fear of their judgment, the fear of being different, was still there, but it was overshadowed by a new, fierce need for honesty. There's something else, Brent said. I wanted you to know that. I love William. He's not just my roommate or the person who helped me. He's the person I want to be with. The silence at the table was heavy for a heartbeat. His parents looked at their intertwined hands, then at each other. Mrs. Lauren reached out, covering both their hands with her own. Brent, she whispered, we just wanted you to come back to us. If William is the reason you're smiling, then we'll spend the rest of our lives thanking him. As they walked back to the dorm that night, the campus was quiet. The air was crisp, but it no longer felt cold. You did it, William said, swinging their joined hands. You officially came out to your parents while also telling me you love me for the first time. That's a lot of milestones for one dinner. Brent stopped under a lamppost, the light casting a warm halo around them. He looked up at William, the man who had seen him at his absolute worst and decided he was worth the effort. I do, Brent said firmly. I love you, Will. I think I've loved you since you left that sliver of light in the doorway on our first day. William didn't say anything. He simply leaned down, closing the distance between them for a kiss that tasted like safety, like home, and like a future that was finally wide open. Chapter 9. The Taste of Tomorrow. The lock on room 502 clicked once. Not 3 times. Not with the frantic, white-knuckled grip of someone checking for a breach. Just a simple, casual click to signal they were home. Brent set his bag down on his desk. The room looked different now. It was no longer a sterile bunker designed to keep the world out. It was a living space. There were Polaroids pinned to a corkboard, Will and Brent at the park, a blurry shot of Brent's first successful attempts at baking, and a card from Dr. Cole congratulating Brent on his graduation from intensive sessions. The air smells like spring, Brent remarked, propping the window open. He didn't check the seals. He didn't look for shadows. He simply leaned his elbows on the sill and watched the students moving across the quad below. They looked like ants from this high up, but they no longer felt like a threatening swarm. They were just people, living their lives alongside his. It smells like General Tso's chicken, if you asked me, William joked, walking in with 2 heavy brown paper bags. He set the bags down on the small table they had added to the room, a real table, meant for 2 people to sit across from one another. In the early days, the smell of takeout would have sent Brent into a spiral of nausea. Now, his stomach let out a quiet, traitorous growl. Hungry? William asked, his eyes dancing with that familiar, warm light. Starving, Brent admitted. William began unpacking the containers. There was no ritual of inspection. No hovering over the plastic to check for needle marks or tampering. Brent walked over and helped, grabbing the wooden chopsticks and 2 glasses of water. As they sat down, Brent paused. He looked at the array of food, steaming, aromatic, and completely exposed. He remembered the protein bars. He remembered the 3-bite limit. He remembered the boy who was so scared of being poisoned that he was starving himself to death. He reached out and took a piece of chicken. He didn't wait for William to taste it first. He didn't look for a sign that it was safe. He just ate it. Good? William asked, watching him with a quiet, steady pride. Perfect, Brent said, his voice clear and resonant. They ate in a comfortable, easy silence, occasionally broken by talk of their upcoming finals and their plans for the summer. They were planning a trip to the coast, a place with wide-open horizons and salt air. A place that was the exact opposite of an attic. Halfway through the meal, Brent reached across the table, his fingers brushing against William's. I realized something today, Brent said softly. William tilted his head. What's that? I used to think that being dead inside was the only way to stay safe. If I didn't feel anything, nothing could hurt me. Brent squeezed William's hand. But you taught me that safety isn't about the absence of pain. It's about the presence of someone who stays when things get loud. William turned his hand over, interlocking their fingers. I'm not going anywhere, Brent. Even when the noise dies down and the world gets quiet, I'm staying right here. Brent smiled, a full, bright expression that reached his eyes and stayed there. He picked up his chopsticks again and finished his plate, every last bite. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the room in hues of gold and violet. The shadows lengthened, but they didn't bring fear. They just brought the evening. And in room 502, for the first time in a very long time, the boy who had been trapped in the dark was finally, fully, home. Epilogue: The Horizon. The Pacific Ocean didn't look like the water in the dorm's plastic bottles. It was vast, unruly, and a shade of blue that Brent hadn't known existed. Standing on the balcony of the beach house, he felt the salt spray dampen his skin, not like the dampness of the attic, but like a cool, refreshing baptism. Thinking about the business degree, or just wondering if you can eat your weight in crab legs tonight? William slid an arm around Brent's waist, pulling him back against his chest. The sun was a giant, melting orange coin on the horizon, casting a long, shimmering path across the waves. Brent leaned his head back against William's shoulder. Neither. I was just thinking that the world is a lot bigger than 5 floors of a dorm building. And a lot louder, William teased, gesturing toward the beach below where a group of kids were shrieking with laughter as they chased the tide. Brent didn't flinch at the noise. He just smiled. It's a good kind of loud. A car pulled into the gravel driveway behind them, and Brent's heart gave a small, healthy thump of anticipation. He watched his parents step out of the SUV, looking less like the stiff, guilt-ridden figures from the bistro and more like people on a holiday. His father was wearing a linen shirt that was already wrinkled, and his mother was carrying a large cooler, waving up at the balcony. Brent! William! The seafood market was open, she called out, her voice bright. As they walked down to meet them, the scene was a far cry from the years of cold silence. They set up a table on the deck, the sound of the waves providing a constant, rhythmic backdrop. Brent's mother began laying out the spread, fresh shrimp, oysters, and corn on the cob. I remember you used to love the beach when you were very small, his father said, cracking open a crab leg and passing the meat to Brent's mother. He looked at Brent, his eyes soft with a lingering apology. I'm glad we're back here. Together. Me too, Dad, Brent said. He reached for a shrimp, peeled it himself, and took a bite. He noticed William watching him out of the corner of his eye, the same observant, protective gaze from the first day they met. But now, it wasn't a gaze meant to monitor a crisis. It was the gaze of someone watching their partner live. Is it okay? William asked quietly, leaning in close so only Brent could hear. Brent looked at the food, then at his parents laughing over a story about his father's clumsy attempts at surfing, and finally at William. It's better than okay, Brent whispered. It tastes like the future. As the stars began to poke through the deepening purple of the sky, the 4 of them sat around the table, the shadows of the past finally drowned out by the roar of the ocean. For Brent Lauren, the attic door wasn't just closed anymore, it had been replaced by a horizon that never ended.